Good afternoon, and welcome to IAB There, our weekly live stream in which we connect the digital advertising ecosystem. I'm Angelina Eng, VP of Measurement and Attribution at IAB, and in today's session, which is titled The Universal Potential of Context, Creative, and Attention, I will be talking to Phil Schrader, CEO at GumGum, and Rob Hall, CEO at Playground XYZ, on why attention-based metrics are becoming the global standard in ad measurement and how combined advanced contextual targeting and engaging creatives can help advertisers significantly boost consumer attention and brand awareness through their digital campaigns. Phil is an executive and recognized thought leader in digital advertising and contextual technologies. And as CEO, Phil Schrader is responsible for GumGum's success in leading the industry in privacy-first contextual intelligence solutions based on a consumer's mindset and not their personal data. And we also have Rob, who has spent many years in the advertising industry and saw an opportunity to bring the art of and science of effective brand building together and founded Playground XYZ in Sydney 2015. And 7 years later, that business has exploded and has about 135 employees, offices all around the world, and is the leader in attention-based advertising solutions. Welcome, Phil and Rob. How are you, gentlemen?
Good to see you, Angie. Nice to be here. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Great to see you and welcome. So thank you for joining. So let's just start off. Can you provide a brief explainer on the relationship between GumGum and Playground XYZ? How did you guys decide to work together, in combining contextual targeting and attention measurement?
Great question, and I think it's a great kickoff question, Angie. GumGum, as many of industry leaders know, has been around for 15 years. And our focus at the company has been, how do we build the world's largest scaled platform that focuses on contextual and creative and a mindset first approach? And so over these 15 years, as we've been driving amazing creative executions to our 1.1 billion in scale, different countries all over, and using context and the environment as the proxy to not only target, to determine what creatives could be the most effective with messaging, and help bridge that alignment to an advertiser and then their target consumer, has been really the DNA of what GumGum has been focused on. And as we look at where we want to pioneer and lead, well, what's next? We have seen so many great initiatives and moves towards attention through the likes of things like viewability, right, Angie? Right? So viewability comes out. It's a great stepping stone of something to hold our hat on. And so GumGum was really early in that. 2014, working with the IAB, 2015, hey, grab viewability. You want creatives that stand out, that make sense in this environment. But we also know that that's just a stepping stone to the really core is, do you connect with your target consumer and are you gaining their attention? So as attention being that really holy grail of what an advertiser is really looking for when they advertise. And I think ultimately for a publisher, it's the holy grail when someone that's engaging in their content spends time with an advertising, experience. That's the holy grail for them too, because they gave their viewer, their reader, their content consuming their content value. And so when GumGum is like, we have two really great components, attention being the third, we knew that we needed to think about bringing those three things together to really harness what we believe is the future framework that most of all successful digital strategies are going to be based upon. And so with that, I'll pass it to Rob to walk a little bit around why and what attention is today, why GumGum, acquired Playground, and then how it's really going to take off both with the existing solutions that GumGum has in market, but ultimately how it's going to start to play a bigger role in just the activation strategies for all players in the industry. So Rob, why don't you you're the expert, man.
Oh.
Like you're the one I go to. When we were looking at attention, I was mind blown by the amount of technology and the data and the AI work, because obviously we're focused on contextual creative. And so Angie, now, as you know, your mind, as we talk about IB, attention, what does it mean? How does it attribution? Are people going to optimize? Are they going to measure? Is it going to be a pricing thing? It's the talk. And so I'll let Rob take over on kind of the way in which it kind of comes with GumGum, but then also kind of a little bit more on the state of where attention sits, because it's quite fascinating.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, so I guess like everyone's kind of heard the phrase, the attention economy, and those kind of words thrown around a lot the last couple of years. Like I think at the core of it, you talk about really what's happening, and it's an attention deficit that's driving the attention economy. So when we set out many years ago to try to understand what was driving attention on ads and how do we measure it and quantify it. And we ended up in a really interesting place where we take eye tracking data from panels, which, we sort of think's like the gold standard. And then we take that and we fuse it with AI and models to help it scale. And I guess that's kind of one of the approaches being used by the industry at the moment. There's other approaches, certainly. So there's others using metrics like viewability and time in view to kind of derive attention. So there's a full gamut for advertisers. We sit in the camp of, the eye tracking and the models. But what's interesting about it is that attention's kind of quickly become a really great success indicator because it's so predictive of brand outcomes or performance outcomes. So if we've now got this signal that we can apply to campaigns where we can say, hey, this impression or this creative or this line item or this piece of targeting is getting more attention pound for pound than others, then we have a signal of kind of ad relevance and a signal of intent from consumers. So what we do is we take our attention intelligence platform, which basically measures ads for attention, and we do that across display and YouTube and soon social, so like covering more and more of the media world. And we work with the holdcos and with publishers and say, hey, let us help you measure attention on your assets better, and let us help you optimize it. But then GumGum came along, and Phil and I started chatting, and it was kind of a real meeting of the minds, because where we think attention signals and the application of attention data is going is very much, thinking of GumGum as a really super user of that technology. So I guess as of today, we're just implementing our technology across the GumGum stack. 2023 is going to be a big year for them where, all of their formats, all of their publisher stuff, all of their creatives are tagged for attention. But I guess that's one step in the big journey that we have kind of planned out, which, is super exciting, and I'm sure we're going to talk about soon.
Yeah. So Rob, quickly though, how do you, so it's with all the properties that GumGum represents and the partnerships that you have, how do you ensure that there's full representation of the different audiences that, because I would assume that a recipe site is much different than a news site or a sports site. So what level of confidence are you providing the marketers as well as the publishers that the level of data that you're measuring in terms of attention is informative to the creative and the context that those ads are placed?
Totally. I won't go into like the really hardcore data science stuff around it, but I'll give like an example. In the eye tracking panels, I guess the job of the eye tracking panels is to create a really generalizable and representative sample of stuff across the internet. So when we put panelists through, we have them view all sorts of different websites, sports websites, cooking websites, recipe websites, and all of those things. And of course, those sites are the types of things that GumGum ads run on, but they're the types of things other ads run on as well. Our job is to try to get a really great understanding of how, attention's occurring across the internet and into the walled gardens and other places too. So, it's a function of the size of the panel and the way that you need to do that, but also the way you train the AI and then prove that the AI is doing what it's supposed to. Like I said, I won't go into the heavy stuff, but use holdout sets and all sort of statistical analysis to make proof around these things.
Great.
And
then,
Angie, can I just add one thing that might be
Sure.
helpful? Because as Rob said, when we connected, what was helpful for me, being that obviously our focus has been on contextual and creative, was the seamless way that he's able to communicate attention in a way that makes sense for, say, me as more of a different generation leader or executive in our industry, and applying that same philosophy into a virtual measured world versus the physical one. And what I mean is, like, when you look at out-of-home billboards, those are placed in where the eyes are going, but there's just one road. So it's very easy to have that billboard represent physically what is going to make an impact for that advertiser within that area, correct?
Yep.
But what Rob and the technology is able to do is to know that every unique piece of content, like you referenced, Angie, whether it be news or whether it be recipes or apartment listings, are all different paths that warrant sophisticated understanding and eye tracking behaviors to help create the experience of where my eyes will engage, where you can capture my attention, no different than why you place something in a physical world, except we have to do it in an instant, on every single page, in every piece of context, across each and every piece of digital. And that is where the complexity of the technology is there. However, the simplicity of what we need to communicate and why is so easily tied back to what success has looked like in the physical world within advertising that we still see every day, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And so we didn't talk about this earlier, but then now you got me thinking a whole bunch of stuff. Oh my God. Okay,
Right?
so what types of conversations are you having with your clients when it comes to attention metrics? Because again, attention metric or attention may be different from site to site, might be from creative to creative, from environment to environment. What are, is there a way to standardize attention
Yes.
today? And
Mm.
how do we go about doing that?
Yeah. I'll let Rob, obviously.
Yeah. Thank you, Phil. So look, it's interesting. So I think so. We sort of talk about the journey of attention that lots of brands and agencies and publishers and creatives are on. So, like, I guess the first step on that, it's a 4-step journey. So bear with me. So step one on that journey is kind of research. And I think over the last couple of years, you've seen lots of what I'd call spot research or field work done around attention. Someone does a study and proves that format X gets more attention than format Y, and those kind of things, or out of home gets X amount of attention and cinema gets Y amount. Now, I guess I've sort of seen the industry move on from that into the second step, which is really about attention data and channel planning. So if you get enough data from step one, you can start to create normative databases and start to feed planning tools and all those things with attention. Step 3 is kind of how do you measure attention on an actual campaign? And step 4 is how do you optimize it? Now, so you asked, Ange, like, where are clients at and what are the conversations we're having? I think most of the clients are past step 1. Some are at step 2, leaning into step 3. Very few are really down at that step 4 sort of place yet in terms of real-time optimization. But absolutely, that's the way the tide's running. And the meaningful conversations are all about, right, now we've done our channel planning. How do we actually kind of turn around and prove this worked for a client? How do we get in there and intervene and make it better in real time?
So what are you guys seeing in terms of attention metrics and the effectiveness as it relates to performance of a campaign?
Yeah, so I'll add one thing, Rob, before you dive into that, just to add to your last point, was that I do think that this is where, when we think about the publisher landscape, Angie, when we were just in some of our conversations we've been chatting about, this is where, when you start to understand the type of content that exists through contextual, right? We know this is an apartment listing site, for example, and it might be a mid or long tail site that's safe and reaches humans. So you've checked your white ops box, you've checked your brand safety box, but now it's an apartment listing site. And attention can now be a proxy to help that advertiser think of a creative that's going to maximize that connection to the consumer on an apartment listing site, different than that on a recipe site. And so attention helps with the creative understanding of what works within the construct of that creative. And it puts a lot of partnership reliability on the publishers with the advertisers, meaning the publishers to know my audiences really interact with advertising. They like this, they see this. This is where we know works, and this is the value my audience would love. And that will be results in higher attention that you'll be able to measure. So you do then create this ability to build off of the attention data that Rob and Playground has built into the contextual data that GumGum has to create the creative that will make sense, garner attention that is appropriate for that piece of content, and then ultimately tie back into the brand's actual strategy on, are they delivering on the KPI that they wanted to from that campaign or goal, if that
So,
makes
yeah, so I think you bring up a really good point, because I think one of the things that I think marketers should be very careful in thinking about is that that because of attention metrics could vary depending on context, environment, but creative has a lot to do with it. And
Oh,
there's a role that the marketers have in terms of making sure that they're getting the best in terms of responses or results from as far as attention, which in my point of view, and I think most of us at the IAB would say that, you know, using attention metrics as a guide for optimization and improving and finding what's working and what's not working is the best approach to do it. And that perhaps the currency conversations that are happening needs to take into consideration the role that creative has, and that it's not just a one-way, it's not a one-way thing, right? Where, yes, I think the publishers have a responsibility to provide advertisers and marketers insight into what's going to work, what's not going to work, and value those placements appropriately. But at the same time, I think that marketers will need to evaluate why things aren't working. And it may unfortunately be due to the creative itself, or maybe perhaps the not delivering the right message to the right audience at a particular life stage, right?
That's right. And I would agree. And as we go back to the simplicity, that's always easy for me to go back to and say the out-of-home model is what drives the value for an advertiser of that billboard, right? We have to it's the traffic that goes through. It's the, right? There's a lot of what goes around that's going to say my billboard on this freeway is going to cost you X amount of money, because these are the other signals around what I have to show you as a way that you're going to get value by advertising on this billboard. Now, once you advertise on that billboard, if you just write with all copy, small letters, I don't even know what that is. So at the end of the day, it's all creative. It is all creative. You placed it in the part, but did I stare at it long enough? Did you put one word and create a question for me? Was there a takeaway? All of those play into the magic of whether that's successful, is the creative. And so the attention, the context, the environment are all how we see that mindset approach to maximizing the effectiveness. Because if I'm going on that on-ramp and that billboard is just muted colors, boring, doesn't fit in, too many words, it's not getting anything from me. Yep. Regardless, and you just shot yourself in the foot on the value that you are not getting because you didn't understand the right way to tie creative onto that placement. And I think that is a big important point that you bring up, Angie. And so we need to remind ourselves of attention can be a great proxy. You can optimize, you can look at it. But at the end of the day, we have to know that attention is really going to tell you whether your creative is effective in that piece of content for that right publisher. And that's what you should be focused on.
So Rob, what types of tools or reports or insights are you able to provide either the advertiser or the publisher in terms of performance and optimization needs?
Yeah, sure. So I guess at its core, we offer measurement solutions. So that's basically, measuring at an impression level quite often, sort of what's happening. So at an impression level, people do really sort of crazy, sort of log level data stuff and those kind of things. But if you abstract that up a bit, really, I think where advertisers are using it the most is comparing things like creative A to creative B. And so to your comment before, Ange, like yep, our technology can isolate the difference between a creative and a media placement. And that's really interesting to advertisers. You have to set up an experiment in the right way to do so, but we can absolutely identify, the impact of creative A versus creative B, targeting A versus targeting B. So is my contextual targeting working better than my, behavioral? And we just released a white paper on this, like contextual targeting is a really powerful way to drive attention, hence sort of the gum stuff. We also look at formats. So advertisers will say, okay, so how is this size format comparing against this one? And then if you go up a level again, it's things like channels. How's my YouTube being compared to, my high impact, or how's my social working, and so on. So it's a full gambit of stuff in terms of reporting. That's available via things like, dashboards, APIs, data dumps into, GCP buckets and all sorts of things. Then there's kind of the optimization piece, which is, the next step. Like I said, that's probably the destination that all advertisers, should get to at some point, which is, the measuring stuff helps you understand what's happening, but then intervening in that and making it better is really the holy grail. And that's kind of, a big focus of ours the next year. So how do we help advertisers do that through their tools of choice, DSPs, SSPs? How do we make it real time and scalable for them?
And I would just say one thing, Angie, really quick. If once you're able to optimize against attention and you launch a campaign and you see you're getting attention on one area that's greater on this type of site or content than somewhere else, and you use that to optimize away from where you're not getting as much attention to the place you are, you've missed the intent.
Totally agree.
You've missed
Totally
the point. The point is you need to look at why you're not giving creative that is effective in those areas not getting the attention, not optimizing and saying, I'm going to put it all over here. No, your creative matched successfully here, but is off here. So try to get another 5 seconds over here on this content by looking at the creative, looking at the placement, understanding how to commit more to that publisher partner to reach their audience. That is the magic. If people are going to approach it with a creative of one size fits all, optimize away from all of this to just sit here, well, be prepared. You will probably have higher prices. You will compete with all your competitors, and you will sit in a fragment of what the available internet can provide you in reach and scale to target audiences and your target consumer. Instead, say, this creative nailed this piece of content. Let's keep going here. Let's relook at our creative in these pieces of content and find a way to capture it and make the creative hum and sing and give us the value. That, I think, is where we need to be very clear that the advertisers will win who think like that, versus I'm just going to optimize away, because they're going to. Does that make sense?
So,
I don't know if that's
yeah.
helpful, but like.
So many people who follow IAB there know that that I came from ad ops, right?
Yeah.
I worked on at very large agencies, trafficking lots and lots of creative campaigns. And the biggest angst that I had was that the creative would often be this one size fits all.
Yes.
But what you're talking about too requires a lot more forward thinking with regards to creative. And oftentimes clients are very overwhelmed that this is, or have this belief that, oh my God, this is like, are you asking for like 1,000 different creative iterations? That this seems like a huge cost from a production standpoint. What are you guys doing in terms of helping to make it easier for marketers to build out these different experiments or creatives? Are we talking dynamic ads here?
Yes.
Are we talking about multivariate testing? How do they do that? Are you creating a tool?
Yeah, great question. So I have a couple ways in which we're approaching that I think is a great question. So first, before we even dive into are there thousands of creatives that could work, let's level set on the industry that we're in, which is we have desktop and we have mobile, and we now have CTV, we now have in-gaming, we now have digital out of home. We're going to have personal home gym equipment. We have Netflix with an ad-supported model now. All of these different environments on their own require unique creative that makes sense for those environments. Now, on top of that, there's another layer of complexity, Angie, that you're talking about is within the in-game category, there are different types of games that would have different creatives that would make the most sense to trigger the best attention from that. So it gets very complex. So how GumGum is helping is first, GumGum has 100 sellers globally. So when we work with an agency or a brand, whomever, it's if you want to be in gaming, if you want to be in desktop, if you want to be on mobile, if you want to be in CTV, we have the creative options for you. So we can help you be in all of them. Step one. The next step is how are we then creating optionality for you in each of those areas? And that's where we're focused our efforts as we head into 2023, exactly that. Dynamic creative, contextually driven real-time creatives that can populate in bespoke or existing standard formats at scale that allow it to maximize its success through attention by seeing how the creative garnered that and created it in real time. So the perfect answer is that yes, at some point we believe, and we need to focus, and that's why I think the industry is going to see this exciting, which I'm so happy about, creative mind and genius influx into our industry, because at some point, right, brands and agencies and everyone's going to have to accept they will not be able to approve every creative that goes out.
Yep.
They will have to rely on the technology to do it the right way for them. And so if at some point a personal home gym equipment company decides to advertise, that Gatorade brand manager might see that ad pop up on the last 5 seconds or 2 minutes of their cycling class because it's the right moment for the creative and the context, but they never approved that ad. But they know it hit every single point that they wanted as the Gatorade brand manager. So at GumGum, we're going to continue to facilitate the A/B testing of creatives and the dynamic creative optimizations that can happen through the contextual tie-in to real-time creative and work with our partners on that, because that is the answer.
Now we got about 2 minutes left. Question for you, Rob. What are the things that you can help publishers and figuring out like what they can learn from attention metrics? Does this, we talked earlier in our prep call around what premium content, right? And that premium content can be subjective, but what can you do in terms of helping publishers to leverage the attention metrics or attention just in general, learnings that you have to help them improve their experiences with consumers?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing is, and you guys were talking about this before, is sort of viewability. And Phil said something like, if we only optimize to the highest attention, generally, we'll be fighting for the same impressions. That's really, sort of insightful. And actually sort of what we're learning more and more is the cohorts of inventory, which are great for one brand, are not necessarily the same cohorts for another brand. For publishers, I think that's absolute gold. And that's the kind of stuff you want to hear. Viewability will mean that for a publisher, everyone's fighting for that top 30% viewable segment, and the publishers are monetizing that at 100% fill rate. And then the stuff underneath that is maybe not monetized as well. What attention signals can do for these guys is say, well, for car brands, this is the best stuff. But for beauty brands, this is the best stuff. And for FMCG brands, this is the best stuff. So I actually think attention signals are going to add sort of density, like price density to the publisher offering, increase their fill rates so that they sell more, and increase the yield because they're going to match the perfect ad to the perfect kind of context or piece of inventory more seamlessly. So that's how publishers, are thinking about attention. That's the journey they should be on, that this is a much more powerful tool for them than viewability was. They have a seat at the table this time. So they're beneficiaries of the technology rather than kind of just absorbing the cost impact of only viewable imps.
And I have to add one thing, Angie, before we go, as I always do, have to have a last word probably, is what I love about this, though, what he says when Rob talks about this comes down to also really big social responsibility and understanding. As much as you want to understand what works for one advertiser in the cohort of specific types of content, advertisers want to connect with their target consumers and who they are. So when you're working with Group Black and you're working with their 200 publisher sites, right? What is going to garner the most attention, and how are you going to connect as a brand to a Black-owned property that is going to look for you to have the thoughtfulness into your creative that's going to connect with this community? And so you have to start to understand the nuances as a gay man, right? It's content cohorts, but then you have to understand your environment and who the users are that are all around to create those experiences that show you care and are connected. And attention can easily say, you want one size fits all? Here's this ad. I ran it all over here and I ran it all over here. These were all Black publishers. These were all non-Black publishers. Attention was 5 seconds, 1 second. Do I optimize away from the 1 second, or do I go back to creative and realize we didn't have the right way to create a message that worked? We need to go back to the drawing board and understand why and what's happening. That is where the issue is going to come if we continue to just move away from the thoughtfulness around how attention can help us really sit back and say, did I connect with the people I wanted to connect with in the right way?
I mean, I love how contextual is starting to evolve and where you guys are taking it, because, again, having been in the media for a pretty long time, there was a point where contextual targeting wasn't able to scale, right? There was certain level of keywords that we were doing, and then we had ad verification, which kind of like put a little bit of a wrench into things. And then you had, but then AI kind of picked up. And I think it's really important for brands to really start thinking about the evolution of contextual, given the new state of data that we're moving into. And just my quick is, if anyone has read the most latest state of data report, we talk about how 80% of publishers' inventory are not identifiable through first-party data. And I think this is an opportunity for everyone to start exploring. And I wouldn't even call it testing anymore. I mean, it should be part of their media mix as a strategy. So,
agree.
But any more last words before we sign off?
No, just that I think it's a very exciting time. I love that the IAB is leaning in, because I do think this mindset approach of really being thoughtful around the creative driving attention through then context's ability to make that experience magic is going to be the success of advertisers in the future. And I think us as an industry starting to try to understand mindset technologies like this and navigate, not just think it becomes, like you said, it doesn't have to be the currency. It should give you an indication of what you should do differently to be more effective, Angie, is thinking that way. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how the industry evolves in thinking around attention as it moves through 2023.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. That was very interesting and an insightful conversation, as always. And I'm sure our viewers really enjoyed that. So thank you again for joining me today and sharing your thoughts.
Totally. We can't wait to do a next year update. It's all been crushing it, and we can sit there and say we were all right. That's our goal.
Right. That's right. So I am Angelina Eng, everyone. Thank you for joining IAB There, and see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.